Military commencement. What President Joe Biden told Coast Guard graduates today. Capitol Hill attack. Why some lawmakers oppose forming a January 6th commission. Olympic Games. The push for safety in Japan and the controversy surrounding China. And global growth. See how EWTN is expanding in Europe. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The House is set to vote on legislation to create an independent and bipartisan commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol. But Republicans are divided on the issue, some even going against Republican leadership. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
More than a dozen House Republicans are expected to vote to support the creation of a January 6th commission, despite House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's objection. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is already promising that the bill will get a vote on the Senate floor.
I hope Senator McConnell will sign on, but if he doesn't, I will still bring it to the floor, to the Senate floor. It's an important thing to vote on, and the American people should know where that's at.
Late today on the Senate floor, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell made his decision.
After careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th.
Leader McConnell says he doesn't want the commission to interfere with the criminal investigation and arrests currently underway by the Department of Justice and law enforcement agencies, and doesn't see what a new commission will reveal, since bipartisan investigations are already taking place in congressional committees and the DOJ. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy put out a statement why he's against it. He says, quote, given the Speaker's short-sighted scope that does not examine interrelated forms of political violence in America, I cannot support this legislation. The Republican leader insists that groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa be included in the commission's work. But Democrats say this is about Congressman McCarthy possibly being forced to testify before the commission.
It's my hope that Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy will do the right thing. And as has been the case with other traumatic attacks on the United States.
GOP Whip Steve Scalise is out too. He and other Republicans say Speaker Nancy Pelosi is trying to play politics. The bill can pass the House with only Democratic support, but it will need 10 Republicans to vote for it in the Senate. I'll stay on top of the issue. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden calls on Israel to seek a ceasefire with Palestinians. The White House says the president told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he expected a significant de-escalation in fighting today. This as the death toll mounts. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, in Connecticut today, President Joe Biden gave the keynote speech at the U.S. Coast Guard commencement ceremony. But before he did that, he increased the pressure on Israel to end the violence. But tonight it appears Israel will forge ahead on its own.
10 days of heavy fighting between Israelis and Palestinians showing no end in sight. A White House statement says President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a detailed discussion on the state of events in Gaza, Israel's progress in degrading the capabilities of Hamas and other terrorist elements, and ongoing diplomatic efforts by regional governments and the United States. Despite that conversation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying, I especially appreciate the support of our friend U.S. President Joe Biden, but said Israel will push ahead to restore quiet and security to you, citizens of Israel. Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida said the president, quote, has to get a backbone.
Stop giving money to the Palestinians and stand up for the greatest ally we have in the Middle East, Israel.
This past year, there can be no doubt Class of 21 is ready for whatever its mission may be.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden congratulates the Coast Guard Academy class of 2021 and told them the world is changing, saying the nation is at a significant inflection point in world history.
And time and again, we've proven there's not a single thing we cannot do as a nation when we do it together. And I mean that, not a single solitary thing.
And going forward, the president challenged the 240 young cadets.
Class of 2021, it's time for you to go out and be the future.
Now back to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hundreds of people have died in the last 10 days because of the fighting, among them children. And clearly tonight, President Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu are not seeing eye to eye. And for now, the war in Gaza continues. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
President Biden has been undoing many of the policies enacted by his predecessor, former President Donald Trump. One policy reversed earlier this week on criminal justice reform actually had support from both the left and the right. An executive order signed by President Trump in 2018 required agencies that issue regulations with criminal penalties to be clear about the conduct that would constitute a crime. Supporters say the measure ensured Americans would not violate laws unknowingly or unintentionally. Joining us now is John Malcolm, Vice President of the Institute for Constitutional Government and Director of the Edwin Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. John, welcome back. Great to see you. So, do we know why President Biden is revoking this executive action on criminal justice reform? Did he give any explanation?
No, he didn't. One slight correction, which is that President Trump signed this executive order called Protecting Americans from Overcriminalization Through Regulatory Reform in 2021. It was literally 2 days before he left office. And President Biden, who campaigned as a criminal justice reformer, rather surprisingly and disappointingly, has revoked this executive order. So just to sort of paint a picture, there are about 5,000 federal laws that contain criminal penalties. There are hundreds of thousands of federal regulations scattered throughout the code of federal regulations that contain criminal penalties, and people can be prosecuted for them. What this executive order said was that any new criminal regulation that an executive agency would promulgate would have to specify precisely what conduct constitutes a crime and what mens rea requirement, what the intent element for that crime would be. It said that if an executive agency wants to create a strict liability offense, so one that requires no proof of an intent to harm anybody, that would require additional review within the White House. And it also said that strict liability crimes are generally disfavored, and that if a prosecutor wants to use a strict liability crime, that they should, first of all, consider pursuing administrative and civil penalties instead of criminal penalties, and should only pursue criminal penalties under unusually compelling circumstances or where there was clear evidence that somebody intended to violate the law. I do not know why President Biden revoked this eminently sensible executive order that's supported by lots of groups on both the right and the left.
John, can you give us maybe some examples of people who were unknowingly performing criminal acts and then suffered the consequences?
Sure. So, there are the federal code, and the federal code of federal regulation is chock-a-block with all kinds of technical violations, some of which, if you commit them, even if you have no intent to violate the law and no knowledge that such a law exists, you are committing crimes. Now, if you're in a heavily regulated industry and as a condition of getting a license, you're informed about these laws, okay. But these regulations, criminal regulations, can often prove to be traps for the unwary. And it's small mom and pop businesses and individuals who totally unwittingly, without any intent to harm anybody, any intent to violate the law, can end up doing something that in fact is a crime.
And what do you think happens going forward with this?
Well, now agencies have a green light to promulgate additional criminal regulations, including strict liability regulations, where if you commit certain conduct, you have committed a crime, whether you knew about the law or had any intent to harm anybody. Not all of these criminal regulations are self-evident. People who commit these acts wouldn't necessarily know that they're doing something that would put somebody in harm's way or doing something that was morally blameworthy in some way. And prosecutors will be free to pursue criminal prosecutions against people who commit those sorts of acts rather than pursuing civil or administrative remedies. And people will end up getting branded as criminals for doing acts that would not have been obvious to the average person would constitute crimes.
Well, John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
With Governor Greg Abbott's signature today, Texas joined the growing number of states which ban abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected. Similar measures have been shackled by federal lawsuits. The Supreme Court has accepted Mississippi's heartbeat law for pending oral arguments. Pro-abortion coalition has filed a federal lawsuit against Indiana's new pro-life law. The group seeks to block Indiana's ban on virtual abortion services. They also oppose written information on how a chemical abortion could be stopped mid-process. Medication abortions accounted for 44% of Indiana's several thousand abortions in 2019. A Spanish city in northern Africa has become a flashpoint for migration issues.
Ceuta no es solamente una frontera de España para con Marruecos, sino también es una frontera europea y que en consecuencia.
Parliament applauds Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez as he asks Morocco to respect Ceuta as a border for both Spain and the European Union. During the past 2 days, some 8,000 people trespassed. Authorities have returned half to Morocco as illegals. Coming up, Summer Olympics, how Japan is trying to move forward in the midst of a pandemic. And Winter Olympics, why China dismisses calls of possible boycotts. Officials in Japan are preparing for the Summer Olympics beginning in July, and they are focused on making sure the athletes and the public will be safe. International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach says athletes deserve clarity and commitment by officials. The IOC has promised to have additional medical personnel available and enforce strict COVID-19 measures. The Summer Games begin July 23rd in Tokyo. Meanwhile, officials in China are weighing in on calls to boycott next year's Winter Olympics set to be hosted in the communist country.
阻碍破坏北京冬奥会的筹办和举行。
A spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs calls the idea of a boycott, quote, a typical American farce. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is calling for a boycott of the game by world leaders to protest Beijing's human rights violations. But the California Democrat stopped short of calling for athletes and corporate sponsors to stay away. Joining us now is Doug Eldridge, a nationally recognized public relations advisor and agent who has represented dozens of athletes. He is also the founder of DLE Agency and Achilles PR. Doug, welcome back. Good to be with you. As we just mentioned, Speaker Pelosi is suggesting a diplomatic boycott. What exactly does that mean, and what type of impact would that have on the Beijing Games?
First of all, great question. Right out of the gate, let's distinguish and delineate between a complete and total boycott and a diplomatic boycott. In 1980, the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics. The Soviet Union didn't move the needle. The only losers, if you can call it that, in that scenario were the American athletes. By contrast, a diplomatic boycott is simply nothing more than key heads of state, be it presidential cabinet members or even the White House themselves, much less congressional leaders like Speaker Pelosi, not making the trip over to China. So really, it's the difference between a shotgun and a BB gun. Both are rifles, but only one is a weapon. So in the context of a diplomatic boycott, it's really a toothless, feckless maneuver by Congress.
Doug, what do you think will happen? I mean, do you think the U.S. and other countries will end up boycotting the Beijing Games, or do you think it's possible the Winter Olympics could be moved to a different country if there's enough international support?
You know, those are two different questions. And I think you also have to kind of put it in context. Over the last 14 months, I think we've all realized that never say never and never say always, right? Anything is possible, no matter how seemingly remote. That being said, the notion of moving the Winter Olympics is as close to impossible as you can probably get. Let's look at 2014 in Sochi. That cost $55 billion. Now, granted, that was tantamount to establishing the Winter Olympics in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Sochi is a sleepy beachside village resort in Russia. They had no infrastructure, no housing, no hotels, no highways, nothing. For Pyeongchang, Korea, it was $13 billion. So the notion of 9 months out just moving Beijing, that's prohibitive. The probability is as close to zero as you can get. For a boycott, I think we're going to see it on the diplomatic side, but a complete and total boycott, no. There's too many losers on the American corporate side, and again, the optics of punishing U.S. athletes for something they had nothing to do with is problematic in of itself. So I think each is merely a talking point and something that can be tweeted by their respective press secretaries. I don't think we're going to see traction, actionable traction, on either front.
You know, you had mentioned the athletes before. I want to talk about that a little more. You know, most of them have trained their entire lives for this moment. What are they saying about the situation, and what would happen to them and their Olympic dreams if a boycott were to happen?
And, you know, that's really the question that we should probably lead with, because in so many ways, they are the people who are left holding the bag or left by the side of the road, if you will, altogether, right? This isn't Tom Brady reloading, relaunching, and rebuilding toward another campaign the next year. Olympic athletes train their entire lives for the opportunity to compete every 4 years, but in reality, once in a lifetime. Now, I've had the privilege, as I should have said from the outset, to work both here on Capitol Hill, where my office is, advising leaders of Congress, do brand advisement, and obviously athlete representation. So I have a unique perspective, really the proverbial 50,000-foot view on all of this. And really the only losers are the athletes themselves. Now, it is kind of a convoluted question because we live in a unique time where athletes are taking a far more active and far more vocal role in political and social issues, right? 35 years ago, Michael Jordan famously said, "Why should I weigh in on politics? Republicans buy shoes too." In 2021, you're seeing an interesting parlay with the likes of LeBron James. He said, "Why should I weigh in? The Chinese government and the entire country itself buys not only shoes, but they're a massive consumer. I've got a Space Jam movie coming out. I've got this, I've got that." So certain athletes will weigh in on domestic issues, but they're reticent because they have to be cognizant of their brand, both domestic and abroad. And I advise my clients, whether it's visiting the White House, of course, that's the people's house. It doesn't matter whether or not you voted for the sitting president. That's the people's house, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In that same vein, be cognizant of where you stand and how you speak in the context of geopolitical instability. And all of that boils down to this. At the end of the day, they represent their home, their family, their street, their town, and their country at large. For Team USA athletes, this is the lifetime honor. They don't wear a logo or a badge. They literally wear the symbol of our country, much like my father's flag that hangs behind me here in my office. So there's different considerations, and the scales are balanced differently when we talk about the Olympics, competing on the largest stage in global sports. So my hope is that ultimately those who are benefited, let the chips fall where they may. At a minimum, let's ensure that those who aren't burdened or hurt are the athletes who have sacrificed and trained and challenged their entire lives just to get to the precipice of doing the best they possibly could for their country. Those are the ones that we should be rooting for.
All right, Doug, sorry we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, persevering in prayer. Pope Francis identifies the distractions to avoid. And the global Catholic network is growing again. How EWTN is expanding its presence in Europe. Pope Francis says prayer isn't easy, but we must always persevere.
Ci sono tante difficoltà che vengono nella preghiera.
At the Holy Father's weekly talk, the Pope said the Lord allows for distractions or dryness in prayer in order to rely on pure faith. Pope Francis identified 3 enemies of prayer: distractions, spiritual arity, and sloth. He added believers never stop praying. And finally tonight, EWTN is already the largest religious media network in the world, and now we are adding even more in EWTN Europe. EWTN Poland opened its new office last week in Wrocław in the western part of the country, and today in Zagreb, Croatia, EWTN affiliate Ladato TV blessed its new studios. Next week, EWTN Nordic will open a studio in Stockholm, Sweden. Joining us now from Croatia is Ivo Bender, EWTN's Regional Manager of Central and Eastern Europe. Ivo, welcome. Great to have you on. So tell us a little bit more about the new offices in Poland and Croatia, and how was opening day?
Well, thank you very much, Tracy. It's very good to be with you. It is a great day here in Croatia, in Zagreb, where a station called Laudato TV has just opened its new, very impressive studio. EWTN has been working with Laudato since its inception about 7 years ago, and it has grown extremely quickly in this beautiful and deeply Catholic country. The new studio is probably 10 times, or the new office and studio is probably 10 times bigger than the previous one. So hopefully it will be sufficient for the next 5 years. It was a very festive occasion. We had the Cardinal Josip Bozanic of Zagreb actually speak at this ceremony and bless the studios and the chapel, which is named after Saint John Paul II. The studios in Poland, they belong to EWTN Poland, which was unfortunately going without a studio for over a year last year due to some logistical issues. But the new one was opened just this past Saturday, and it will serve EWTN Poland, which is a fast-growing Catholic channel in another of the most Catholic countries in Europe.
It is so wonderful to hear, so exciting. But I also understand the road to get there wasn't easy. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, of course, we have had our share of problems in Poland. It was extremely difficult for the crew to operate for almost a year without a hub, without a place to congregate, to exchange ideas, and to actually produce shows. But it turns out that it is possible to run a TV station without the hardware, so to speak. But of course, right now, thanks to the good sisters from the town of St. Catherine outside of Wrocław, who allowed us to use one floor of one of the wings of their building to finally stop being homeless and call this lovely suburb of Wrocław our home. In case of Croatia, it took some years of preparation to launch Laudato TV, but nowadays Laudato is truly changing Croatia. It has put Catholic Croatia back on map, and it is probably, well, I can say no, not probably. It is certainly the fastest growing television channel in Croatia.
Wow, that's so wonderful. So what do you hope each office will, achieve? And also, Ivo, can you tell us how the church is doing in each of those countries?
Both Croatia and Poland are generally viewed as the most Catholic countries in Europe. In fact, I think there is a sort of a friendly competition vying for the title. Both have been traditionally Catholic for probably about more than 1,000 years each. In case of Croatia, I think the goal is one of the goals is to truly reaffirm the fact that this is a country that was built on Christian values, and also to tell the world the story of this country. Croatia is only about 3.8 million people strong. It's a relatively small country, but with a fascinating history full of upheavals, full of struggles for independence, and also has some incredible saints that the world should hear about. And I think the new studios will enable EWTN to help tell Croatia's story to the world. It is similar in the case of Poland. However, the Laudato TV is celebrating its 7th year of operation, and Poland has only started in a very humble way about 2 years ago. So probably will, but nonetheless, This is also a source of great inspiration for EWTN viewers who I think receive about one monthly package of news, of interesting things that are happening in the Catholic Church in Poland. So thanks to these two studios, from the world perspective, people all across the United States and wherever EWTN can be watched, can see the wonderful witness of Catholics in Croatia and Poland.
Well, Ivo, thank you so much for your time today and sharing this incredible news with us. We really appreciate it, and God bless you for what you do. Ivo Bender, EWTN's Regional Manager of Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you again, Ivo.
Thank you very much.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.